Welcome everybody. So I am back and bringing you guys a brand new movie review. This is going to be for Iron Man. This movie stars Jon Favreau, Robert Downey Jr., as well as Gwyneth Paltrow. This is also directed by Jon Favreau of the Jungle Book fame, as well as Disney's live action The Lion King now. This is the first movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and this is one that I originally didn't want to go see. I was like, you know what? I had my fill with, the first three Spider-Man films with Sam Raimi. I actually really do enjoy those movies, excluding the third one. The first two are really great. And I'm like, oh, just another superhero movie. Why do I want to see that? Some people would probably say that's a superhero fatigue. I don't really buy into that nonsense, because if they're really good like Iron Man, then I'm going to continue to support and see these movies in theaters. So my dad drove me to the theater to see this movie, and I actually came out really loving this film. I actually think this is one of my favorites within the MCU universe, as well as Iron Man 3. I think that's a really good film. But Robert Downey Jr. plays this sort of narcissistic, tech whiz. He's kind of like the Steve Jobs of the Marvel MCU universe. His father, Howard Stark, created the Super Soldier program for Captain America, the First Avenger, which you guys will later see in the later films. Obadiah Stane is the vice president guy of the company, and he's doing some shady things on the side of doing back deals with terrorist organizations such as the Ten Rings. The Ten Rings are these terrorist organizations similar to what we've experienced in the Middle East. They're trying to capture Robert Downey Jr., which they eventually do in the film. So the Ten Rings are this terrorist organization that is trying to capture Tony Stark in order to make him and force him to build the Jericho missile, which he's kind of testing for the military. There's an event, and Tony Stark pretty much does the Jesus T-pose, and you see the Jericho missiles in the background, which are these high-tech missiles that once they hit the ground, they kind of explode into a giant fireball, and there's a giant dust storm and stuff, and it completely consumes Tony Stark in that awesome scene. Before that, you've got that scene within the convoy, and they're attacked, and then you later find out that Tony Stark has been pretty much seized so that he will build the Jericho missiles and pretty much be forced to use his own technology in order to build these things. Little do these guys know that Tony Stark is actually secretly building a Mark I Iron Man suit, which is like the original Iron Man suit from the first comics. It's kind of like an all-silver, sort of like a walking tank pretty much, and this thing just lays havoc upon the village that the terrorists are hiding in once he finally breaks free. There's another guy that's kind of helping him along the way, and he vows to try and save this guy, even though the guy that he is protecting, Yinsen, I think is his name, he eventually ends up dying, and eventually Tony Stark leaves the compound. Obadiah is the guy that pretty much sent him there, so he is not surprised that Tony escaped, but he's still trying to get them the Jericho missiles. Once Tony Stark makes it back to the mainland, he pretty much is like, yeah, no, I need a cheeseburger and stuff, which is pretty funny. That's where you meet Jon Favreau, who's pretty much Tony's chauffeur and driver. He's pretty much the butler. You later find out that Tony Stark is building a new Iron Man suit. This one's the Mark II, which is all silver, which he pretty much uses as his test Iron Man suit for the Mark III, which is the one that we come to know and love from the comics, which is the red and the gold. Meanwhile, you've got Rhodes, played by Terrence Howard, which is Tony's not only mentor but friend. He's one of these no-nonsense military guys, and even in the sequences where you see Tony Stark trying to have fun with him, he's all business and no fun. You later find out that Obadiah Stane is working on his own Iron Man suit with the arc reactor technology that Tony Stark used to make in order to free himself from his captivity. At what point you find out that Obadiah pretty much calls out one of his scientists. He's like, all I want you to do is make this thing smaller, and he's getting really pissed off, which I think is a really funny sequence. And the scientist guy is really nervous because he doesn't want to be intimidated by Obadiah Stane, and he's like, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not Tony Stark, which is actually true. This leads to a bunch of cool sequences, such as a fight sequence that takes place in the city of Los Angeles, where you've got Obadiah Stane using the Iron Man suit that he pretty much stole from Tony's designs to fight Robert Downey Jr.'s Mark III Iron Man suit. You've also got the training sequences and stuff, and especially the sequences in this film where Tony's building sort of the Iron Man suit. He fails a lot of time, pretty much similar to like what Albert Einstein went through in building the light bulb is pretty much what Tony Stark is going through. Eventually, he kind of succeeds with his repulsor technology and stuff like that. This movie is really great. I think on a fundamental level, this movie is really fun, entertaining. You got really great dialogue sequences. You've got, sequences of really great action and stuff like that. You got really cool sequences where you show sort of the relationship between the characters. While this movie does rely heavily on CGI, and it's not as heavily influenced by CGI as some of the later films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this movie uses a lot of practical effects, which you don't really see that much now because it was kind of in that time period where practical and CG were kind of used as a tool, not as much as a method. I think this movie really does good in the visual effects department. You got Stan Winston working on the Iron Man suit and stuff, and this is before he actually passed away, so Rest in peace, Stan Winston. You even see in like documentary footage and stuff where, you know, Robert Downey Jr. is like expressing how cool this Iron Man suit was when he first put it on and stuff, and it was just like the comic books. In this movie, you kind of explore a little bit of Tony Stark's narcissistic side. He always ignores his friends. He's a little bit more obsessed about his work and stuff. He is dealing a little bit with the alcoholism that you've seen in the comic, and which is funny enough because Robert Downey Jr. in real life was kind of going through that problem. He had a lot of like alcoholism abuse, and he actually went to rehab for that, and this was kind of his comeback movie. And this movie kind of set the tone for Robert Downey Jr.'s career, eventually leading him to be one of the key members of the Avengers. And it's really cool at the end of this movie, you finally see Samuel L. Jackson appear. And when I first saw this movie in theaters, I didn't know anything about the end credit sequences and stuff. Later on and throughout the film franchise, you kind of start to get the hint that maybe you should stay a little bit later for the end credit scenes to see what's coming up next. But Nick Fury comes and tells Tony Stark that he's creating the Avengers Initiative and that he wants him to be evolved. I think one of my favorite scenes in the entire film is towards the end when Philip Coulson, who's the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., is giving Tony Stark these cards to read pretty much at a press event to kind of quell some of the conspiracy theories about the Iron Man suit. And Tony Stark just throws that all away and he's like, yeah, I'm Iron Man. And that pretty much was the foundation of everything that we've seen since then with the Avengers, especially Avengers Infinity War. It's been 10 years since then, and I think this movie still is relevant to this day. So if you haven't seen this movie, if you haven't watched Iron Man, you should definitely do it. There's a really cool chase sequences in this film, such as the V-22 Raptor scene where you see kind of Tony Stark dangling from an F-22 Raptor. They're kind of dogfighting and stuff like that. That was pretty sick. There's some cool convoy attack scenes within this film, which is eventually where Tony Stark gets captured and everything. The sequence where Tony Stark sees all of his Stark Industries weaponry and it's being used against him as well as the military. It's a pretty cool sequence because it leads to him eventually building the Iron Man suit. And there's some scenes in the tunnels between him and Jensen that are really cool, and they kind of give you the backstory between him and Jensen as a character. Eventually the breakout sequence, which is really awesome as well. So I would have to give this movie an A. I think this movie is fantastic. I think, again, that you guys should definitely see this if you have not seen the very first Iron Man film. It's definitely worth the watch because this is one of the best films, I think, in the MCU as well as a superhero movie in general. So yeah, that's my rating for the film. Hopefully you guys like this review, and as always, guys, rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.